Welcome to MouthpieceSports.com's High School Buzz session. We're going to go to the mat in this session because I'm fortunate to have Mike Bukowski, the longtime head wrestling coach at Montini High School. Coach, thank you for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
You can notice the shine coming off of his right hand. That's a ring from one of the 6 state championships. I believe it symbolizes 5 of them, number 5, that he won at Montini. So obviously, Coach, you know what it takes to make a great wrestling team and a championship caliber team. But my first question to you is, what makes a wrestler? Because let's face it, the quarterback's a star in high school. The basketball player's a star. There's 3,000-4,000 people coming out to see them. Wrestlers have a different mentality. What makes a wrestler?
The first thing that comes to mind is the word discipline. You have to be disciplined in the sport of wrestling. There's a lot of things that go into becoming a championship caliber wrestler. A lot of sacrifice, the weight training, the weight monitoring, the physical, hand-to-hand combat nature of the sport itself. There's a discipline and toughness that really has to exist, and some kids have that naturally, and some kids you're able to coax that out of in the right environment.
Well, you've obviously been able to do that, and you said something there that interests me for a long time. Obviously, wrestlers have a different mentality. This is hand-to-hand combat in my book, and they have to make great sacrifices. And one of the issues surrounding wrestling is weight, and I don't mean weight training, I mean weight itself, because they wrestle at obviously very specific weights. Your philosophy on that, because it can be controversial with some young men.
It is very controversial, and I think it's one of our biggest pluses as a sport, and it's one of also our biggest curses. Wrestling affords a young person an opportunity to compete against someone that's their same size. I coach football also too, and I have a 150-pound defensive tackle going against a 280-pound offensive tackle, and it's a mismatch. With the weight classes in wrestling, it's one of the fairest sports that there is out there. So that's a great aspect of it. But at the same time, just like anything else in sports, and you can look at it in other ways too, there's always going to be an opportunity to maximize your potential and your participation. Our philosophy, and I think a lot of high schools coaches' philosophy, is we want a young man to be in as good a core shape as they can. We want them to be a lean athlete. We want them to be in tremendous condition. Now what happens is, because of weight classes, you have a young man that's been wrestling in your program for 3 or 4 years, maybe he's a senior, and he's a natural 125-pounder. And let's say he can't beat the 125-pounder there. So now he has an option. He has a choice. Is he going to bump up to 130 pounds? He's going to cut down to 119. And that happens a couple of times, I think, on every team across the country and all these high school wrestling programs. And I think that's where that negative starts to come in. And it's much better now than it used to be many years ago. And I don't mean to sound like someone who claims about the old days when things were much tougher and everything, because in a lot of ways things are much tougher for these young guys now. But we have a weight management program that's implemented by the National Federation and the State Association. We body fat test all these athletes at the beginning of the season. They have to pass a hydration test. So it's monitored very closely, much more than it has ever been in the past.
So there's stopgaps in place to regulate that, so we don't have issues like what used to happen.
Correct.
By the time you get a young man, Coach, and you mold him into a potential state champion or team champion, I would assume a lot of these young men have had some wrestling experience. And what I'm getting at is some of the feeder programs. Obviously, you have some at Montini because you get some quality athletes.
We do, and that's a big key. Obviously, we have been blessed to have some tremendous talent that we've had at Montini. When I first started as a head coach, or actually before I was a head coach many years ago, I started a youth wrestling program at Montini. I knew that would be a key for the future, and it's nothing that's a secret or it's a rocket science to figure out. You look at all the successful programs around you, and you see that when you have talented, experienced wrestlers coming in, they're going to make the kids in the room that aren't talented or experienced at a point better by wrestling them every day. And of course, those kids are at a level that they can be successful right away. So it really is a natural thing. And as with youth sports now, I don't care what my daughter's involved in youth softball, and not when we were 10 years old, we went out and played in the park all day. Now these girls and guys and wrestlers, they're playing 60 games a year, and wrestlers are wrestling 100 matches a year and wrestling all summer, and that's just kind of the nature of the way things have led now. But the feeder programs are a huge necessity, I think, to be successful.
And it's a positive, and if you don't have one, you're going to have a tough time beating Montini, I would guess.
Well, or any quality school, you're going to be lacking, there's no doubt about it.
You've made Montini a glamorous program, in wrestling at Montini. But let's face it, wrestling isn't always a glamour program. However, wrestlers now are being afforded an opportunity to be very much in the glamour spotlight. And what I'm getting at is the advent and the popularity of mixed martial arts. You had a young man in your program, Chase Beebe, who is a former mixed martial arts champion now, recently lost his title. Right. But former NCAA wrestlers like Randy Couture and Matt Hughes and Dan Henderson are now superstars of MMA, making millions of dollars. Back in the day, your wrestling days were pretty much over either in high school or college, and that was it. It's not the case anymore. I'd like to get your thoughts on the advent of MMA.
It's definitely added another dimension to the sport, you know, and there is something that these young men can aspire to. Chase Beebe was a 4-time state champ for us, you know, was a tremendous high school wrestler, and actually got a scholarship and went to a Big Ten school. And you know what? Wrestling wasn't what it was for him when he was younger, and he went in a different direction and got involved with the mixed martial arts. And you know, he's worked extremely hard and actually is making a living, you know, in terms of doing that. He's a very disciplined young man and works very hard. He's been great. He's come back to the school and talked with our kids, and you know, our kids take a sense of pride in that. But it's an aspect that's out there now, and I think it's becoming more and more popular. And I think the wrestlers are successful at it because there's a certain degree of toughness.
Oh,
you know?
absolutely.
And I think that really shows, and I think that's something that they take. I know as a former wrestler, I take a great deal of pride in that. That's one of the you know, necessities of our sport.
Well, let's face it, most fights start out with a couple of punches and they end up on the ground, and the wrestler's going to have an advantage there. And the wrestlers are the superstars of this sport. And I personally am a fan of MMA. And I have a family that has a boxing background. My youngest brother is a Golden Gloves boxer, but I watch it all the time in all the different sects. I can only see this getting bigger and bigger. And where do you see it going?
Well, I think you're right. I think it is getting bigger and bigger, and I think actually it started to trickle down even to the high school level. I've got kids right now that they are doing some MMA training throughout their high school years, you know, in the springtime, and you know, they're doing different types of jiu-jitsu, and they're doing different types of striking and boxing, and some of them have even competed in certain limited tournaments. You know, it kind of makes me cringe a little bit, but you know, high school, any wrestlers have kind of a mentality, and it's very hard to turn that switch off, you know. Sure. And if they're going to do that, you know, it's like anything else, and they're just as likely to get hurt doing that as they are working out in the wrestling room. So it has trickled down, and I think that gets some kids excited.
Well, who would have thought wrestling would become a glamour sport? But I'm glad it has, and I'm glad there's an opportunity, and I'm glad there's gentlemen like yourself that remain dedicated to high school wrestling. It's great to have you here on the Buzz Session.
Well, it was very, very nice for you to have me on. I appreciate that.
Thanks to Coach Mike Bukowski of Montini High School. Stay with us. There'll be many more things to come on the High School Buzz Session here on MouthpieceSports.com.